Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Laurence Jankelow. Thanks for being on the show, Laurence.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Laurence is the co-founder of Avail, an all-in-one software solution designed for do-it-yourself landlords that is used by more than 600,000 landlords and tenants across the United States. Laurence and his family immigrated to the United States when he was 10 years old from Johannesburg, South Africa. Prior to launching Avail, Laurence spent 7 years in data analytics, first as a consultant at Protivita. Correct me, Laurence, am I saying
that? Yeah, you were so close. Protiviti.
Protiviti, Chicago, and then at Goldman Sachs. Laurence, thank you again for your time and just being on the show today. I'm grateful. But also, give the listeners a little more about who you are, and let's jump into Avail and a few other things.
Yeah, sure. I mean, kind of like you said, I'm a do-it-yourself landlord myself. While I was working, I had some rental properties that I owned and managed. And so that's where we kind of now cater towards do-it-yourself landlords. My business partner, Ryan, and I, at the time we were working in investment banking. We were doing the 80, 90 hours a week, and we had these rental properties on the side. And, we were trying our best to manage them, trying to be professional. And it's really hard to be professional when your main tool is Excel and you're emailing each other back and forth rent rolls, or you're merging cells and painting them pretty and then printing it, and that's your rental application that you give to a tenant. It's hard to be professional when that's your tool set. So we decided we were going to quit our jobs and build tools specifically for do-it-yourself landlords. And so that's what we set out to do, now called Avail. So I'm pretty excited about that.
So you and your business partner were working full time, and you had rentals on the side. Is that right?
Yeah, and actually that's pretty common. We see that a lot with our customers. Almost all of them will have 1 to 5 to maybe 10 units, and then they're doing their full time job somewhere else. And that's actually part of the challenge for us is they don't necessarily identify as landlords. A lot of the times they'll think I've got this condo that I'm renting or the single family home that I'm renting. And then you'll ask them, hey, are you a landlord? And they're big, no. So it makes a very interesting marketing challenge for us. But in the end, yeah, we're there to help people who have rental properties. They need to coordinate all the day-to-day activities. And we basically provide the professional suite of tools to help them do that.
Very nice. So, and I'm glad you brought that up. Like, I haven't thought about that before. Somebody that doesn't really identify as a landlord, even though they do, they do have maybe 1 rental or 2 rentals. They don't really see themselves as a landlord. But I'd like to dive in there a little bit to, you all pursuing to do this while, you all were working full time. You mentioned working 80 to 90 hours a week. And I like hearing entrepreneur stories around that, because it's the same thing I had to do. And I think it's a common misconception to people, to listeners, and lots of people who are thinking they're going to pursue this real estate business or any kind of other business on the side, just that level of commitment. So would you elaborate a little bit on just your path, to getting to where you're at now, maybe a little bit from the initially and having to put in all those hours?
Yeah, absolutely. When both Ryan and I were working full time, and you have these rental properties on the side, you all you want to do is go home and sit on the couch and watch TV. But if you had set a life goal for yourself, for us, both of us, was financial independence. We wanted some passive income, as is the case for most real estate investors. If you set that kind of goal, then you tend to not go home and just sit on the couch. You try to push that goal forward a little bit every day. And so that's what we were doing. But we were doing it in the most inefficient way, trying to do things through paper checks or, Excel. And so we actually set out looking for, is there software that's going to automate a lot of this for us? Because I do want to just sometimes relax, but obviously that, that's counter to my goals. So we looked for tools that wasn't anything we wanted. And then we did what is probably the most illogical thing you could do. We quit our jobs and said, hey, we're going to build these tools for ourselves, and we hope that there's a market of other people who want this stuff as well. And, when we first got started here in Chicago about 7 years ago, we probably bright-eyed and dreamy, we thought we could get an engineer to come and build this for free for us. Like, hey, we'll give you equity, but equity is meaningless to most, if you're like really small, haven't even started anything. And so we couldn't find anyone to build it for us. And so what we decided to do was essentially roll up our sleeves. We taught ourselves to code, and then we built the product ourselves from scratch. And we built it exactly the way we wanted it, the way we use it. And I think in a lot of ways we got lucky, because we see now the 600,000 landlords and tenants are using basically what we always dreamed of, to kind of do everything day to day, from finding tenants through listing syndications to screening to collecting rent online, all those things that we wanted. Now it's good to see it finally out there.
Wow. Rolled up your sleeves and learned to code. That's not something I would want to do.
I thought leaving investment banking, I'd be taking a step down in the hours, but it went up.
So quitting your job and just saying, I'm going to go do this. I mean, did you already have some other income? Did you already, what allowed you to be able to make that transition and be that confident?
Yeah, there's always got to be something, because you still have to feed yourself, at the end of the day. And I think Ryan and I are lucky. I think we both acknowledge that we grew up a little privileged more than others. We're fortunate enough just to have an education that could get us the kinds of jobs where we could start to compile a little bit of money. Now, we weren't rich by any means, but maybe it's all relative, I suppose. And when we quit our jobs, we had to go down to bare bone expenses. I think we also had some stocks that we would trade on the side, and I think we were just depleting our savings. We were selling option strategies, which is pretty risky, just to put food on the table for ourselves. It was definitely a ramen and peanut butter sandwich situation for a good 2 years for us. For me, I'd actually just gotten married at that time. And so I had gotten married middle of February, and then 2 weeks later is basically when I put my 2 weeks notice in. So
and she still said, I do.
Yeah, I think I kept telling her it was coming, but I don't think she knew as quickly as it happened.
Wow. So, let's jump in a little bit to, how anyone can create, this stress-free passive income. I think you have some ways or things you help people with, but to just help people can become financially independent through real estate, and maybe ways you've done it, or you can help us do the same.
Yeah, as a financial goal, everyone should be trying to shoot for some sort of financial independence, whether that's through real estate or the stock market or through other passive income streams or other income streams in general. You should be doing that. Real estate, I think, is one of the easier paths, because it's a concept that people can understand. You can see a physical building, you can walk in and out of it. That there's value there. Whereas I think stocks are a lot more ephemeral and harder for people to really grasp. So if you're a beginner investor, I think it makes sense to start in real estate because it's easy to understand. That being said, I think there is some truth to it takes some money to start in real estate, because it's a physical asset. You can't buy partial ownership of it very easily, unless you're doing like a REIT. But then again, you miss like a lot of the lessons there. But there are a bunch of things people can do to get started. I think if you're going to buy a primary residence to live in, you could probably maybe change what you're thinking and buy a 3-flat and live in one of the units and rent out the other 2, and you can get a really good mortgage rate. Only have to put 3% down if you're going to do something like that. So there are ways to get into real estate without a lot of money. They just take a little bit of tact and maybe a little bit of patience. And there's a bunch of those avenues that I'd recommend to your listeners, if they haven't yet gone down the path of starting their real estate careers. Start thinking about how you can get in. Just the earlier, the better.
Yeah. Earlier, the better. No doubt about it. I know a lot of listeners are pursuing commercial real estate, and they're trying to grow their networks and, investor databases and to find that first property. But I think house hacking or, and getting into a property like you're talking about is a great way to get started sometimes. But also, with your all's level of experience with building this platform, I'd love for you to elaborate too, just on some rental property systems, just some systems that we should have in place, whether we're a do-it-yourself landlord or not, I think understanding some of these things is crucial, even on the commercial real estate side, because I want to know that my management company is doing these things right. And when I'm interviewing those companies, I want to understand these systems better. So I'm going to have better questions when I'm trying to figure out if they're the property or the management company for my property. So could you elaborate some on that, and let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think having systems and processes in place are important, especially if you're wanting to have more than one rental property, and trying to establish it with that first property is the right time. You don't want to try to get it when you've got too many. It's all going to fall downhill from there. One thing I'll mention to your listeners, Avail specifically is for residential rental properties, I'd say. So there's there are some obvious differences and nuances if they're going to go more commercial or retail rentals, and depends also how they're in their head defining commercial. So commercial can mean a couple different things to people. It could mean you have shops and stores, or it could mean you have a residential of 5 or more units. So in either of those cases, you want to have a system of process. For us, we start thinking about how you can be consistent with your tenants. So at the very beginning, there's a lot of laws and regulations in place, especially if someone's going to live in it, in the property. So you have to obey fair housing laws. So that starts even with how you find tenants. And I hate for this to sound like an infomercial for Avail, so my apologies ahead of time, but Avail is going to help with that entire process. So if you have a vacancy, you'd come to Avail, you'd create a listing with us, and we would just automatically syndicate that across the web for you, so that you have your one listing going to a lot of different places, not just where potentially white people rent from or black people rent from. So you can avoid a lot of fair housing problems by picking just one website. We'll kind of put them on a lot of places. That has huge benefits to the landlord, because you are exposing yourself to more people, more diverse set of people. And at the end of the day, you just have more options. So that's number one. And then the second thing from there is you want a process around how you're going to screen applicants. You can't choose to do a credit report for one applicant and not the other. And obviously you want to do some sort of tenant screening, so you want it to be consistent there. And so for us, we get you 18 or so leads in that first week or so of having that listing. You've got to then whittle that down to the people that are truly interested in the place. And that usually comes with some pre-screening questions. We'll hand those to you. There'll be like 10 questions that normally you'd want to ask a renter. Who else is living here over the age of 18? Do you smoke? Have you ever been evicted before? There's a bunch of things. Are you willing to pay for an application fee and authorize a credit and background check? There's some pre-screening questions to make sure you have the right candidates. And then you want to go and get those screening reports. So we hook into TransUnion to provide real-time tenant screening reports, credit reports, criminal background check, eviction checks, so that you can look at those things. And you should try, I'm going to mention the word over and over again, consistency. You really want to be consistent with each and every applicant and how you do that process. And then from there, you hopefully have an applicant that you want to now sign a lease with, and you've got the perfect tenant. And so a lot of the problems don't stop there. They actually begin there, where now you need a lease agreement. And sure, you could go to a lawyer and pay $500 to get a lease agreement, and immediately after 1 year, it's out of date, and you have to figure out what you're going to do because the laws change all the time. And so what we do is we provide city and state specific lease agreements. They're all digital. So we know what city your unit is in. We're automatically going to feed that lease agreement into your system. And that's what your tenants would sign online. And you would sign it online. And then from there, you set them up to pay the rent online and submit maintenance the rest online. So if you can have a system that takes you through all those operational tasks of being a landlord, you'll find that you're not spending the 20, 30 hours a month on this part-time gig of being a landlord, but maybe it's now only 1 hour a month. And that's a huge savings.
Do you find you're still pursuing real estate as much as you thought you were, now that you all are focused so much on the software? Yeah,
well, I haven't had personally, on a personal level, no. I haven't had as much time as I'd like. And then, I'm in Chicago, where housing is super expensive and it's really kind of unaffordable. And that's one of the reasons why, for a lot of landlords who maybe are first getting started, we actually recommend not using a property management company, just so that you can get in and try to keep some of those returns for yourself. Because what will end up happening is, if you buy a unit in Chicago or a 3-flat in Chicago and you have to pay a property manager, all of a sudden you're not making money on the property anymore. And then if that's the case, you shouldn't even be investing in it. So, for that reason, we try to encourage a lot of our landlords to really do it themselves, not to be self-serving where they'll come and use our software, but because that's the only way to make a return in some markets. And because of that, for that reason, I haven't really bought a lot more, just for how much strain the business puts on my time.
Sure. So, but with somebody like yourself that has access to that much information, I mean, 600,000 landlords, tenants, I would love your feedback on just how they're dealing with the COVID-19 crisis and how it's going to be, how you see them being affected in the future as well.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of real-time rent data that happens in our system. So we actually have a lot of information. And it's actually been really interesting to watch. In March, when everything was starting to take shape here, we had sent a survey out to our customer base, and we had gotten 10,000 responses from our tenants. And we asked simple questions like, have you lost your job? This was in the middle of March, so it was really early. We asked, are you planning on paying your rent? Are you going to be able to pay your rent? What does the future kind of look like for you? And we just wanted that information so that we could, help formalize what is a process that a landlord could put in place, knowing that a lot of rents were not going to be paid. And what we found is, 54% of those tenants back in March had said they've already lost their jobs due to the pandemic. So that was absurdly high. We haven't even seen those numbers yet in unemployment rates and all those things. And it took a while for it to finally catch up. And now we are seeing segments of the population that have 50% plus unemployment rate. But then what was interesting to see is, did they pay on time? So in the surveys, they said they want to pay on time, but I think it was something like 40% of them said they weren't going to be able to pay the rent. And what we found is April 1st rolled around, and we actually didn't see a decrease in people paying rent. We actually saw a slightly uptick from normal. We think that's because the stimulus checks had just come out right then, and tenants were applying the stimulus checks. And so then we set our sights on May 1st. We're like, oh man, all May 1st then rent is going to drop. But then again, like the unemployment stimulus came into effect, and people can finally get through the unemployment lines and get that unemployment. So we actually didn't see any decrease in May or June either. And we're right now in the middle of, the July rent, and we're actually not seeing any decreases there still. So we're actually seeing overall in the rental market, things are kind of stable for the time being. And surprisingly so. And I think a lot of it is because landlords are making deals with tenants. Stimulus is kind of working, but obviously it ends at the end of this month. A lot of those unemployment and other stimulus packages end at the end of this month. So we'll have to see what happens August 1st. You
have any projections for the future for the next 3 months, 6 months after all this?
Yeah, I mean, what data can do a lot of things for you, but I don't know that it necessarily predicts the future. I do think August 1st is going to be telling. I would personally predict that if there's an additional stimulus, that we'll see rent payments drop August 1st. There's just people aren't necessarily back to work at full capacity yet, and that money's got to come from somewhere. So I would imagine without some intervention that August may not be as pretty as the rest of this.
What's a way you've recently improved your business that we could apply to ours?
What's a way I've improved my business to reduce hours?
No, what's a way you've recently improved your business that we could apply to ours?
Oh, sure.
Our business.
Avail specifically. Well, we have 25 employees. Are you talking how many employees do you guys have currently? I'm just trying to get a sense for the size of your business.
We'll have anywhere from, I'll say 3 to 4 people. That doesn't count property management or general contractors, people like that, but just, working for us. And it could be 4 to 6, depending on, virtual assistants and things like that, but much smaller.
Yeah. So one of the things I'd recommend to anybody, and this is maybe stolen from Robert Kiyosaki, in the cliche book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, was to get experts surrounding you. For us at Avail, that meant hiring people who knew what they were doing. Ryan and I are first-time entrepreneurs. I think are good problem solvers, but we aren't good at everything. We weren't good engineers. We weren't good marketers. So part of what you have to do is find people who are experts at those things and bring them onto your team. Whether that's as an employee-employer relationship or an advisor-mentor relationship, every business can be improved by adding more people to it. And there's always a way to add people in an affordable way. So if for your business with the 3 to 4 full-time employees, think about how you could always bring on more influential, knowledgeable, sophisticated people onto the team, even if it's an advisor capacity and you're not really paying them a salary. Potentially there's some other way that they derive value. Or if it's for your listeners and they're thinking, how do I invest more? They should all get mentors, or somebody who's gone from nothing to 100 units or 100 properties or so, and let them guide it. There's as much value in the mentor relationship for the mentor as the mentee. So in a nutshell, bring more people onto your team.
Great advice. So tell me maybe a couple tips on how you found that person, that individual that you're willing to bring onto your team.
Yeah, well, for us, it's we're very patient in how we hire, super patient. We also have, as a startup, you have to try to find people who are passionate, don't have resources the way they are used to. So you've got to look for someone who's really resourceful, scrappy, and that just takes time. And there's not as many of those people out there. And you just don't want to rush into something like that. We've made that mistake. We've hired a few people who didn't really understand what startups are about. And I don't mean, the amount of work. I just mean the resourcefulness. That can still be done in a 40-hour week. You can't just be at your desk, not know how to do something and give up. You have to push yourself forward. So how do we find those specifically? We've designed a series of challenges during the interview process that we can suss out that information. We source people from AngelList, which is a website dedicated to people looking to work at a startup. Here in Chicago, there's another website called Built in Chicago. Again, people looking specifically for startups. So if you can try to narrow down the universe a little bit for people who want to work at startups, that helps as well, if it's a startup.
What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Persistence. There are a lot of times Ryan and I should have just given up. We probably should have just given up, but we didn't. And I think that's probably true for anything people do. Like, we have a tendency to, as soon as something gets difficult or outside of our comfort zone, to abandon. And actually that can even happen before we even start. A lot of people just won't start something because it's out of their comfort zone. And so for us, stubborn persistence is the biggest benefactor, or the most beneficial thing for us.
I meant to ask you too, can you share a couple of the challenges that you have for applicants when they're applying to work with you?
Yeah, well, we usually do a pretty extensive take-home project. So, and then we do that for all roles. So that's pretty common for an engineering role. So you'd be, here's go code this, and then we'll review the code together. Very common for engineering roles. Most other places don't do that for customer service or product marketing or marketing in general, but we do. We do it for every role. We want to know that someone can go take something on their own time, figure it out, unassisted, use their resources, and then come back with a complete thing. For us, most recently, we told someone, hey, can you design a referral program from the ground up with these 3 extra challenges on it? And it comes back, so people will come back either very successful with that or very unsuccessful. The thing is, every person you bring onto the team has to be stronger than the last person. So the challenges only get harder every year.
That's an interesting thought. Every person you bring on has to be, or say that again.
Every person we bring onto the team has to be better than the last person. So in December, we brought on a new head of product, and very clearly was awesome. And it's considerably better than me at product management, which is kind of a role I was doing before he joined. And flat out told him, hey, you're going to be the worst hire we do going forward. And not in a bad way. He was fantastic, but that sets the precedent. If every person you bring on, you tell them you're going to be the worst, let's make sure next time we hire someone better. Then you're only going to get a highly skilled team, because there's the tendency for A players to hire B players or B players to hire C players. And you just want to keep getting your team better every year.
Laurence, how do you like to give back?
Yeah. Well, we with Avail, we do a lot in that realm. We write a lot of educational content. There's been a lot of lessons we've learned, both as landlords, as founders, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, and we write tons of educational content. And we put it out for free on our website. To the community, I've got 2 little girls. I got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. We'll take around their little red radio flyer wagon, and we'll pick up trash on the weekends sometimes, they're very interested in trying to help the planet or save the planet. And so we'll do a lot of that. We'll just walk. We live close to Wrigley Field, so there's a lot of trash always. And so we'll just pick stuff up, and they love that.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. It's great to get your kids involved doing things like that as well. Laurence, it's been great to meet you and learn more about Avail and just to hear more about your story as well. Even hiring people, it's interesting to hear some stories like that as well. Because it's difficult. It's difficult to hire somebody, right? And just being an entrepreneur altogether and growing our business. But tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you or learn more about you and Avail.
Sure. Well, if they want to learn about Avail, pretty simple. Just come straight to the website, avail.co, avail.co. Full suite of tools for landlords. It's entirely free. And I also love talking with people directly too. So if there are questions around how to start your own business or how to get started in real estate or landlording questions, maybe you already got started and you just need a little bit more expertise, people can contact me directly at my email, which is lawrence@avail.co, and that's LAURENCE at avail.co. I love talking with people. I've been on maybe 20 or so podcasts in the last 6 months, and I give out my email every time, and no one ever emails me. I'd love to have someone finally email me and let's get a conversation going.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.